السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. Alhamdulillah. In our lessons on Imam Ghazali's Ihya, in which we're looking at a thematic summary of each of the chapters, each of the books of this great summary of how to bring our religion to life, we're in the section on seclusion, the Book of Seclusion, and we've seen why seclusion is central to the devotional life of the believer, in that in our day-to-day we are called upon to have time in which we step away from our worldly needs in order to turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So seclusion is central to our religious duties, but it's also a sunnah. Right? That there's a minimum stepping away, which is to do our obligations, but also there's encouraged stepping away for for extra time in which we recite Quran, in which we remember Allah, in which we engage in extra worship, whether by day or by night, right? And other ways of cultivating our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, all of them are a type of seclusion. Insofar as if seclusion, we would define it practically as stepping away in order to turn to Allah. And there's a critical difference between the praiseworthy religious duty of uzla, which is stepping away to turn to Allah, and the idea of just being alone. Because as we'll see today by looking at the benefits of society, Imam Ghazali puts it very dramatically. He says that there is no benefit, and we actually, when you come to the slide, you'll see, I translate it as there's little benefit, because that's what he means. There's no benefit in the seclusion of the unlearned or the ignorant. Because if you don't know your deen, if you're stepping away, what are you going to do? You're going to be lazy. Or you're just going to sleep or waste your time. Right? So that's why this is the general case. And we dealt with many important things, because sometimes one does need to step away. So there is a seclusion that is meant to be built in to our general religious life as a believer. But for some people, if you are having trouble correcting your course in life as a believer, then consult with the learned, the wise, the trustworthy. Sometimes there may be a case to step away for a little while, if you're struggling spiritually or if you're struggling in life. Sometimes if you have some very difficult life decisions to make, one of the things to do is to step away for a little while. Take some time to reflect. And it can help you make superior decisions. Now, it can help you make superior life decisions, but also sometimes, especially if we consider that the praiseworthy religious seclusion is to step away to turn to Allah. Because even in some of our worldly decisions, there are spiritual implications. For example, you are in the Greater Toronto area. You have your family here. You have circles of good religious company. You have access to Islamic knowledge. You're connected to the community in terms of the masajid and other institutions. There are layers of religious benefit that you're connected with. But you have a job that you'd give a 7.2 rating. Now you've got an opportunity for a 9.1 job in middle of nowhere, Saskatchewan. With all love and respect to Saskatchewan, but middle of nowhere, Saskatchewan, there's one brother who came to Seekers a couple of months ago. He was so excited to come here. It's very unusual. It's like a nice place, but why are you so excited? I didn't say that. I was thinking, why are you so excited? Because in his hometown, here in Southern Ontario, he has one other Muslim that he finally met. One other Muslim. And the nearest Friday prayers are over an hour away. He doesn't really drive. It's a long story. So you'll be somewhere where you are far from family, far from friends, far from teachers, circles of knowledge, mosques and so on. But it's a big decision because there's clear, immediate worldly benefits, but there are many downsides. And one of the benefits of taking a little time out to reflect is not just in general about my overall relationship with Allah in a general sense, but sometimes how certain big steps in life might affect my relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That we don't do enough. How? Like this job example. Big job decision. Very often we consider only the short-sighted aspects of it, the material choices. Right? And there's a very good book by a Harvard economist called The Dismal Science. How modern economics harms individuals, families, and society. Right? Because this idea, a very material way of looking at something affects how we approach life. And of course, our perception of life is much broader because we also believe we have certitude about the next life and about our relationship with Allah. So in such big decisions in life, sometimes we need to step away, but not just to step away and I'm thinking about it, but to step away to assess your decision in light of what choice will help me cultivate my relationship with Allah. And that's sort of the answer of the istikhara. So sometimes stepping away before a major career choice, before marriage. You'd always wanted to marry. So Jack always wanted to marry Jill. This happened. Jack and Jill became Muslim because Shaykh Yahya went, came to town and they both became Muslim. So everyone said, no, you're Jack and Jill, you got to get married. Now, Jill took her religion very seriously and learned, etc. Jack just hung out with the boys. She would attend study circles. He would play basketball. Right? And as nice as it is to play basketball with fellow Muslims, however, there's a big difference between cultivating your faith just by hanging out with others and cultivating your religious understanding and practice. So now 3 years have passed. Everybody's been saying Jack must marry Jill, Jill must marry Jack. Now there's a difficult situation because they keep running into each other because the basketball and the sisters' circle happen to be at the same time on Sunday mornings. And then they serve food. So they've kind of more than noticed each other. And that was a tough choice. So sometimes it helps to step away, but rather than just, let me think about it, it can help to connect that with an act of turning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's also a type of purposeful stepping away for some of the big decisions in life, so that we make life decisions that fulfill that istikhara framework, that what will be good for me in my deen and my dunya, short term and long term, directly and indirectly, and to keep you away from what may harm you in the above. That's the framework of decision of the istikhara. And destine the good for me wherever it may be. And that wherever it may be might be in a decision that is tough for you. That's tough for you. But that kind of seclusion may be helped by taking an opportunity to travel, for example, to a place where you can consult the learned and the wise, for example. Sometimes you know how to make the decision, but you just need to think it through. Sometimes it helps to connect that with going and consulting some trusted teachers or others or mentors that can help you put things in a larger, wider perspective. So these critical life decisions. But one has to be very, very careful of just stepping away just because you feel hurt or pained and other such situations. And that's one of the sad realities. Sometimes, people step away from society for wrong reasons, okay, which actually don't make rational sense. Where a person is emotionally, it may make sense that they had a very difficult marriage relationship. So as a result, they decided, I'm stepping away. Now, okay, marriage didn't work out, but doesn't mean that you no longer need friends, family, community, society, etc. Or someone used to be involved in one religious project, and they supported the new wave at the masjid. But the new wave crashed against the old rocks. And the rocks stood firm, the wave disappeared, and the board did not change. So you're dismayed. The solution isn't to abandon community, because you weren't going to the masjid just because you really believed that Auntie Shireen and Usada Shireen and Sister Shireen should all be on the board. Right? So sometimes in those kinds of, when we feel riled up, it helps. Not to go alone, but to spend some time in seclusion, which is to step away in order to turn to Allah. Right? Because the stepping away to turn to Allah can relate to either reconnecting with Allah, or it can relate to cultivating one's relationship with Allah. And it can also relate to helping you turn to Allah in a particular difficult circumstance in life, work, family, relations, or when you're particularly hurt. But that should be accompanied by either before you step away to consult, or as part of stepping away, you make a part of that stepping away consultation. That you travel to Allentown, Pennsylvania, for example, because there's a number of scholars there, Shaykh Yahya Rodas, Ustad Amjad Tarsin, others that you know and trust or benefit from. So you want to also be able to get their input, for example. So that's one of the aspects. In rare cases, there are those who may be in circumstances where they have to step away completely. And that's the case of the sleepers of the cave. And it's not an accident that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam taught us that we should recite Surah Al-Kahf every Friday. And it's good to reflect on it. And one of the many lessons on it is seclusion for the cultivation of one's faith. Similarly, there is a much neglected sunnah to recite the opening 10 or 11 verses of Surah Al-Kahf, or the last 10 verses of Surah Al-Kahf each night before one goes to sleep. And that's a protection from the fitna of the Dajjal and the tribulations that come in times of turbulence and corruption. So that's an opportunity that we reflect on how does that relate to bringing seclusion into my life in this general sense. But you may be in a situation where, and there are people like that, where you need to just step away for a little while. And rather than just step away and just be alone, you step away to turn to Allah. How? One of the opportunities of stepping away to turn to Allah is when Allah puts you into a situation where you're not able to be in society right now. Jack and Jill got engaged. Jack was driving, towards the hill where he would be meeting up with Jill. But he was just thinking of Jill. They come, And what happened? He didn't notice that there's a turn in the road. He drove the car off the cliff. Broke his leg. Now, he has to be in rehab for a number of months, etc. The nature of his work is that he cannot do his work. He's in construction. So now, during that time, you could just sit there playing video games and, deciding that I want to build the ultimate team on FIFA 2023 or whatever the current FIFA game is, etc. Or all those TV series that I never saw. I want to see all of, what else am I going to do? Or you can say, okay, what do I do with free time? There's an adab of free time. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us this in the Quran. فَإِذَا فَرَغْتَ فَانْصَبْ وَإِلَى رَبِّكَ فَارْغَبْ. When you free up, then arise, and to your Lord be ever yearning. When you're freed up, arise, and towards your Lord be ever yearning. So you realize that, okay, Allah has put me in this circumstance where I'm stuck. Either due to sickness, or you're attending to a sick parent. So you're not able to work right now, etc., but you also have a lot of time. Because a sick parent, let's say, doesn't need your constant, you have to be there, but you're not able to work. So what do you do during that time? It's time for turning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When I was at university, we went down to this conference in the States, and there was several scholars who were there at the same session at this conference who all memorized Quran in jail. They're all wrongfully detained in Algeria. Wrongfully. Now what do you do? Okay. So sometimes you choose to step away. Sometimes you have to step away due to sickness, due to family circumstance, due to life circumstance. You got thrown into jail. But what do you do about it? What do you do about it? And one of the best things you can do in situations like that is to see, how do I turn to Allah? Now, how would you do it? That's one of the things you do through consulting. Consult that, okay, look, I'm going to be spending 6 years in jail. I'm not. I'm saying the example. So, how do I make the most of my time when I am there? And there are many, many other such situations. Sometimes your work itself may have partial seclusion built into it. Such as, someone works as a security guard. So I was trying to convince a particular person there, a security guard in a business, in a building, that you probably are not allowed Islamically to just sleep during your shift. But no, he checked the records, nobody comes in between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m. So he schedules 2 hours of sleep then. Rather, that's an opportunity. Let's say you do a night shift. Any worship you engage in during that time counts as night worship. So plan it out. Right? Plan it out. Sometimes work situations give opportunities for seclusion. Now you have to do your work fully. Often there's other built-in times of seclusion. Someone they go on site to different clients. Right? They go on site to different clients. Now you go to the client and there's a lot of waiting time. What do you do there? Commutes are stepping away. Because if you get on the 401, do you really have to check what's the traffic? What's the traffic on the 401 at any time between 6:30 a.m. and 7:30, 8 p.m.? It's slow. There's traffic. Expect delays. You can say, all right, expect delays. How much do you need to know? Turn on your GPS with traffic, whatever on, and you know how long it'll take. Listening to the traffic report won't change anything. If you're in Canada, listening to local news, nothing almost happens in Canada, which is, God bless, boring. Places, I was in one country and there's some demonstrations happening that I said, how are those demonstrations? Because there's violence. I said, oh, not too bad, Shaykh. Only 7-8 people killed. 7-8 people killed, there's nothing much going on. I said, oh, it's safe. So he drove us like literally 400 meters from where the killings took place. I was like, I know the city. Like, I just grabbed my tasbih, just making dhikr. I said, I'm not looking. And what happens. He wanted to argue about what route to take. So things like that, rather than distracting ourselves, we find those opportunities to turn to Allah, either the big things or the small things. Right? And that's why one of the things the scholars say about the sort of act of partial stepping away is that you should default to turning to Allah. You should default. What should be your default impulse? Because you plan out your life. We have, just as we have religious needs we're seeking to fulfill, we have worldly needs we're seeking to fulfill. But when time opens up, what should be your default? The Prophet ﷺ said, keep your tongue moist with the remembrance of Allah. And that's not just dhikr, but dhikr or Quran or beneficial knowledge or any act by which you seek Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? And that is the prophetic advice. And that's a type of seclusion. You're lining up for visiting some museum somewhere. What do? The time of seclusion. Now there's other good things you can do. You can greet people and talk to them with good intentions. And there's reward in it and you benefit. But also, what do most people do? You're in the line up at the airport. Put on your earphones, listen to Quran. There's so many things you can do rather than defaulting to distraction. Okay? And that's an act of stepping away as well, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. But Imam Ghazali, today what we're looking at is the benefits of society and company. Imam Ghazali puts it in dramatic terms, right? He said, know that there are religious and worldly benefits that are not fulfilled without seeking the assistance of others. And this requires company and society. This requires company and society. And it's a trump card, actually, because there's a Mauritanian scholar in the US. He kept trying to convince me to go to Mauritania. I said, Mauritania is so good, you should experience life in the desert, etc. So I'd keep telling him, Shaykh, but why would I go to the desert when I can be in the city? He said, the people of the desert have purer hearts and purer minds and this and that. I said, the Prophet ﷺ came from the Mecca, which is known as Qura, the original city. And he moved to a city called the city, Al-Madinah. And second argument, a lot of religious duties aren't due if you're out there in the middle of nowhere. If you decide to go live in a cave, how do you do Salat al-Jumu'ah? Can you do Salat al-Jumu'ah with Eid prayer, congregational prayer, right? And visiting the sick, and so many duties and recommendations require society. And there's many other benefits that are not typically fulfilled without the benefit of society and company and people. So one of these benefits is learning and teaching. Learning the religion and teaching it. Learning it for everybody. And Imam Ghazali puts it in dramatic terms. Imam Ghazali has this beautiful eloquence, but he says, one of the greatest acts of worship in our religion is, and in this life, is learning and teaching. The Prophet ﷺ himself says, إِنَّمَا بُعِثْتُ مُعَلِّمًا, I was only sent as a teacher. And there's a wonderful work, it's part of the level 1 of the Islamic Studies curriculum at Seeker's Guidance. It's called The Beginning of Guidance. It's our introduction to spirituality by Imam Ghazali, how to operationalize the Sunnah. And one of the interesting things he deals with in it is how to spend one's day. How do you spend your day? According to the Sunnah. And basically there's 4 levels, 4 things you could spend your day generally in. Like could you occupy yourself with in your day? There are 4 things. The highest of which is to seek or spread Islamic knowledge. That is the highest way to occupy your day, if you're able to. If you're able to. It's not for everyone, and it doesn't fit everybody's circumstance, but that's the greatest way to spend your day, all else being equal. If you cannot do that, then to devote your day to the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's what you were created for. That may sound like, oh my goodness, like how would you do that all day? But what was the Ahl Suffah doing? They're just hanging out in the Prophet's mosque playing basketball? No, right? Some were learning, others were in worship. The third way to spend your day is to have a worldly occupation in which you benefit others for the sake of Allah. In which you benefit others for the sake of Allah. The worldly occupation could be could be working, could be other things. This includes things like being a mother, for example. That's a worldly occupation, and you're benefiting others now in terms of the children, long term, society. The fourth viable way of spending your day is to have a worldly occupation in which you stay within the limits of Allah. You're not benefiting others, but you're not harming others, and you're not transgressing the bounds of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the fourth thing you could do in life, meaningfully. Outside of that, you could have some worldly occupation in which you're either of harm to others, I ran into this guy, really nice, seemed like a really nice guy, but I had to do a quick maneuver. They said, I'm working at Meta in their artificial intelligence division. I think we're doing a whole bunch of things that are unethical. That's, what town do you live in? I changed the topic. I said, don't they have that? There's a particular dessert that they're known for. So one of the ways you get out of awkward conversations, because if he brought it up to ask me, is that halal? I'm not, your family, you're not apt to speak the truth. Right? So what you don't know won't hurt you. And he didn't seem, because I'd seen him before, he was talking about how much he loves working at this company. So I didn't think he was ready to leave. So I just changed the topic, because why tell him something he's not going to listen to? So where you're either harming people or transgressing the limits of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But that, even at that baseline, that level 4 existence, right, where a lot of people find a lot of dissatisfaction in their life, you enrich that by bringing the other layers into your life. That don't just stay within the limits of Allah at your work. Don't just stay within, I'm doing no harm, but do some good. Do some good at work. And we talked about some of that in the Book of Earning a Living But if that's not your primary intention, to be a person who's actively benefiting from work, the stepping stone, you can reverse these 4 levels. The least viable daily occupation is do no harm and stay within limits. But then try to do some good. How? Institute having a good intention each day. Intend to establish the worship of Allah during work time. Try to remember Allah a little bit. Intend to have good character. So you deal with people on the basis of good character. So you benefit. Try to spend some time in learning during work. Some extra time of devotion. What do you do before the meeting, before this? Just keep a copy of the Quran, or just, keep your Quran app on your front screen, so that rather than going to Facebook, you go to the book. Right? And you can get a lot done. Right? If you have an activity monitor on your smartphone, you can see a lot of them now have by default an activity report. How much time you spent on social media? How much actually time did you spend on the Quran app, for example, other things? So you get a good sense. So you try to optimize that time. But that's only facilitate the benefit of society is that you can learn. And this is one of the greatest acts of worship in this life. And we have a severe shortage of people who have dedicated themselves to learning and teaching the deen. But there's another point that Imam Ghazali makes, that seclusion before learning your religion, typically entails wasting one's time and squandering one's life. Because you don't know what to do in your stepping away. You may be stepping away not out of seclusion, but out of aloneness, for example. And that's detriment. That's detriment. And you're alone, you don't know what to do. Or you overdo things. And then he also says something really profound that should give us cause to think, that says, knowledge of religion is the foundation of the religion. Thus, there is little benefit in the seclusion of the unlearned or the ignorant. And many people do this by, sadly, if you go overseas to any country overseas, go to Egypt, go to Amman, go to Jordan, go to Turkey, wherever, you find many people who migrated there, who left careers and this and that, they went there. But what are they doing there? Basically, they're leading worldly lives, but just in a religious garb. And then they're frustrated. And then they're angry. And then because they feel they wasted their life. And, we can't judge any individuals, but very often that's the case. Why? Because they never bothered learning. So what are they doing there? Many of these places, the questions I get asked is Netflix that bad, really? I said, well, I don't watch it, so I can't tell you that, but yeah, I guess it's a waste of time, isn't it? And sometimes just let people come up with the answer. Because if you don't learn, you may either not know what to do, or you may not find the motivation to actually do it. Because the nature of religious teachings, they're not only telling you what to do and how to do it, but also why you do it and the consequences of doing it. That is the aspect of the encouragements and warnings, both in the Quran and the Sunnah and in the writings of the scholars. So people miss out on things like that. So that's why Imam Ghazali cautions regarding this, right? That something that you can benefit from by being in society is the opportunity to learn. And this is, by and large, one of the most neglected sunnahs of the deen. And people practically, it's not a religious activity to take your kids out to a rib fest, and then you go to a halal fest, then you go to a a Nihari fest, then you go to a Mensaf fest, then you go to this fest and that fest. I was asked to participate more than once in a shake off or something. It was basically two sheikh types having a cooking competition. I was like, that's not about to happen. Right? Partly because I follow my father's footsteps in this. I'm a consumer, not a producer. Right? So that's one thing. Secondly, I'm not from the school of hard work, and cooking is hard work, so I wouldn't do it. But, a lot of times, what are our expressions of deen? What are our expressions of deen, even with our children? It's basically entertainment in religious garb. The faith of your children won't be preserved by playing basketball or foosball or watching the World Cup amongst Muslims. Right? That's not a religious activity. Now, if it's a means, it's part of a means towards fulfilling the religious aims. What are the religious aims? The scholars of the Ba'alawi tradition tell us the religious aims are four. The religious aims are four. Everything else in our life is a means of facilitating, preserving, or at least not disadvantaging these four things, which is al-ilm, knowledge, at-tazkiyah, there's knowledge, there's purification of the heart and soul, al-amal, to act upon it, to act upon one's knowledge on the basis of taqwa, and fourth is ad-da'wa ila Allah, and to call to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And everything else, your career, your entertainment, everything else is there because you need it, or it doesn't disadvantage from the core aims. What is the meaningful purpose in life? And we have to be cautious. Right? Even sometimes we approach something religious, but just as a comfortable distraction. Someone goes to the RS conference or the knowledge retreat. Why are you going there? Well, we get to be downtown. It's a nice break and this and that. You're waiting for, and I intend to learn from these scholars. I want to, even the conference, some of the biggest, greatest minds in the West, they're presenting about our challenges and so on. But if you're not going anywhere in life, and you don't go anywhere with an intention, what do you get out of it? You get the bazaar, and now it's closed, marché, it's closed, sadly. Okay? And you get this and that, but you don't get anything out of it, right? So that's one of the critical things that we have to look at in the opportunity that being in society gives us. The Prophet ﷺ said, the hadith is Sahih hadith, الدنيا ملعونة ملعون ما فيها. Worldliness is distant from divine mercy, and all that is of it is distant, or is distancing from divine mercy. إلا ذكر الله وما والاه, except for the remembrance of Allah and what relates to it. وإلا عالما أو متعلما, except for a person teaching or seeking sacred knowledge. Remembrance of Allah and what relates to it is that the challenge for the believer's life is to infuse the remembrance of Allah into everything else they do in life. Your work, your rest, your family, your socializing, your entertainment, your play, everything all of that becomes subsumed in your turning to Allah and does not disadvantage you from that. So that's one of the opportunities of being in society, the opportunity to learn. The opportunity to learn. And that's one of the things when you travel, and we'll be looking at, that's the next book coming up. We'll be starting in the new year, the book of travel. And one of the things to do in travel, anywhere you go, there are scholars and righteous. Even if you go for vacations to anywhere, there are scholars and righteous. There are masajid. There are other things. But connect, you connect to living benefit. Right? What's the real benefit of visiting Istanbul. It's not the doner kebab. You can get pretty much as good doner over here. But rather, it is both the benefit of reflecting on the past, but there's present living benefit. Because Islam is found in living hearts, not in blocks of stone, as beautiful as they may be. So that's one of the benefits. Another benefit is being of benefit to others and seeking benefit oneself, because most people need to earn a living, need to engage in financial transactions, and those have benefit, but also to be of benefit to others with one's wealth, by giving in charity, by assisting others in the good, by lending money to people. That's why lending in a good way is one of the great acts of drawing closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The ulama actually say that lending money can have greater reward than giving in charity. Why? Any suggestions? They say because, let's say you have a cousin. No, even someone you don't know. Because if you just give them charity, or just give it as a gift, they may not take responsibility with it. So you have a cousin or a nephew. They're kind of hard up, so you said, look, I'll give you $10,000, you can start your business. Just let them keep it. What comes easily goes easily, right? They don't take it seriously. But sometimes they say, sometimes, not always, in some circumstances, lending the money can be better because the person will take responsibility with it. They have a sense that they have to pay it back. Even if you intend that 2 years from now, I'll waive the loan. But you let them be responsible and nicely. And sometimes investing the money is better than lending the money. So let's say you've hit uncle status and you got a little bit of acquired wealth, and a cousin, someone in the family, a friend wants to start a business. Now you could lend them the money, but you invest. Why? Because there are benefits to investing. That, a lot of young people just sort of it's always been the case. They say, well, I'll do it, I'll figure things out myself, etc. But because you're an investor in the company and you know about this area, they have to seek your permission, your advice, etc. So you're able to coach them, mentor them, because you have a vested interest in it. Because you invested $50,000 in this venture, so you helped them succeed, but you also participated in it, so you had the intention of helping them succeed. So there's great benefit in it. So it's only in society that all these kinds of benefits arise, benefiting people with one's wealth, one's person, to be of service to others, whether it's within family, but also more broadly. And service is one of the great doors to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentions, Wallahu fi awni al-abdi madama al-abdu fi awni akhi. Allah is in the aid of his servant as long as his servant is in the aid of others. And it's come from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam also that khairun nas anfa'uhum lin-nas. Khairul ibadi ilallah anfa'uhum li'ibadihi. The servants most beloved to Allah are those of greatest benefit to Allah's servants. You can't do this when you're alone. You can't do that when you're alone. And service done with sincerity has greater reward than worship. Because worship benefits you, but service benefits others. But you're rewarded for it if it's for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you only nurture that for Allah-ness, so to speak, by the time in which you turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's this amazing hadith. It's a hadith Qudsi, and it's also in the Bible. And it's actually cited by Martin Luther King Jr. in his final speech before he was executed, or before he was murdered. And the Prophet ﷺ relates, and the hadith is in the Sahih, that Allah Most High says, it's the hadith Qudsi, that Allah Most High will ask the servant, meaning on the day of resurrection, my servant, Ya abdi, maridtu walam ta'udni. I was sick and you didn't visit me. I was hungry. And the servant will say, how can I visit you when you're the Lord of the world? How can you be sick when you're Lord of the world? I was hungry and you didn't feed me. Then how can I feed you when you're the Lord of the world? Said, did you not know my servant so-and-so was sick, was hungry? Had you fed them, you would have found me with them. And it continues, my servant, I was thirsty, you didn't quench my thirst. How can I quench your thirst when you're the Lord of the worlds? And the same thing. All that only happens if you're in the context of society. So the opportunities of service. But society is for these things. Right? It's for seeking and spreading good. Not just, well, if you're in the GTA, you have, I don't know how many, anyone have Zabiha.com on them? Kind of died out, but it's kind of cool because you could tell how many restaurants there are within 5-10 kilometers radius. And last time I checked, which has been years ago, I don't even know if it's on my phone right now. No, it's not actually, sadly. Okay, it's not. But we had over 220 halal restaurants within a 10-kilometer radius. Sometimes even religious people come. So what are you doing? It's, that's not the purpose of society. Those are things that you do en route to fulfilling your ultimate purpose. Similarly, another benefit is acquiring and instilling adab. Acquiring adab is for the general person, is only in the context of keeping company of people that you can acquire adab. And this is one of the things that we'll be looking at in the summer. We'll be coming to the book of Disciplining the Self. And how do you acquire adab, proper propriety, right concern and right conduct? You acquire it firstly by learning, secondly by observing others. By observing others. Imam Ghazali mentions that, that this is one of the lessons of the hadith, that the believer is a mirror of the believer. You observe others both in the good. And one of the adab of keeping company is that you learn to look with the eye of approval. That you don't notice that, oh, he's got his cap on wrong. You don't, but just let's say, oh, she's wearing a jacket that's 4 sizes too big. He's wearing socks that don't match. But rather, you go with the intention of observing the good in people's actions, their conduct, etc. So you may acquire it. That's one of the benefits of company. Big things and small things. The third is by the counsel of a friend. By a counsel, whether a friend of others, someone gives you advice. The fourth is by your enemies. And Imam Ghazali says, an enemy will typically be more honest with you than your friends. Because most friends will tell you what you like to hear. But that's not really what a true friend should do. But an enemy will say it as it is, even if they exaggerate significantly. So you ignore the exaggeration, but very often there's truth to it. They say, you're arrogant, unreasonable, wasteful, and just an all-around awful person. So it's okay, I can't do anything about the all-around awful person. There's that, but am I arrogant in the way I deal with it? Maybe I am. And then it gives you something to reflect on. Someone says, you're completely stingy, you're this, that, so it insults you in 10 ways. You realize 30% of it was actually fully or partially true. So it's a great benefit. So these things are acquired by people, but also by having to respond to how people are with you. How can you be patient except by being in situations where you have to be patient with people? How can you be generous when you don't feel like it except by dealing with people and having circumstances where you have to be generous, and so on. So this is one of the great opportunities of society as well, is that you acquire adab by being in company and observing those around you in good, by keeping good company. So you have people who give you advice, and that's one of the early Muslims said. We looked at the duties of brotherhood earlier. لا خير في صحبة لا نصح فيها. There's no good in company in which there's no sincere counsel. Then you advise one another, but you don't overdo it every time. Let me tell you. But you establish a relationship of trust and love and concern and care, and you pick your spots, but you mention it. And also by your enemies. And then by the circumstances that arise out of company that cause you to have to acquire adab. Also, one of the things that tests adab is commanding the good, giving counsel. Because these are two great duties, but they have requirements. Because you cannot just go to a random person and say, by the way, you were in a state of nudity during your prayer. And men struggle with nudity in prayer. Right? Ruku', especially on Friday prayer, you go to ruku', and there's the great, the seas parted for Sayyidina Musa, but for a lot of people, their shirt and pants parted, and the moon was sighted in the midday. And that's an act of nudity. Now, of course, you're not allowed to look at. That's why, someone actually asked me, "Can I close my eyes when I go into ruku'?" I said, "No. You're supposed to be looking at the tops of your feet, right, when you're in ruku'. So you shouldn't be seeing that." I said, "But I can see it even if I look down at my feet." I said, "Okay. Well, don't pray behind people who are wearing t-shirts." But either way, being able to advise someone, but in a good way, also requires adab. And it's an opportunity, right? Because you're benefiting someone else by giving that advice, especially if you do it right. Another of the benefits of company is that the human being, as we looked at in the opening session of this, when we looked at seclusion, the human being needs comfort, right? Comfort. And the human being, we are needy. And one of the aspects is at a social level, at a social and emotional level. And we find comfort in society. We find comfort through things like weddings, invitations, family, friends, and and all these different circles of social connection. But they're also of benefit. They're also of benefit if we do them in accordance with the Sunnah. And if we beautify these social relationships in accordance with the Sunnah, there's tremendous reward. You accompany those with intentions. You're not just visiting your friend because they're just your friend. You're visiting them for the sake of Allah. And what we looked at when we looked at the duties of brotherhood and keeping company. But the believer should seek, Imam Ghazali said, also should have that social comfort through keeping good company of the religious, the righteous, the learned, to visit the people of knowledge. One of the beautiful customs in many Muslim lands is day one of Eid is for visiting family. But day two of Eid, they would visit the scholars and the righteous and visit friends and others. And I remember in Damascus, sometimes we'd go in groups, and sometimes we'd have visited 30, 35 scholars in that way. And you have religious gatherings and so on. And these are ways, some people say, how come all these gatherings people have for this, all this religious socializing? Well, people are going to have social time. But rather than just have social time, going from one steakhouse or one, foodie joint to another, you go to meaningful religious gatherings of benefit. Mawlids and dhikr gatherings and other such occasions where that rest and relaxation, you listen to beautiful devotional singing, etc., is religious relaxation. There's also, of course, in keeping company in society, many means of attaining reward. Because if a believer is someone who realizes, as Imam Ghazali puts it in the beginning of Guidance, that, in life, your time is your capital. Your time is your capital. And you can either invest your time in the means of profit or of loss. And these are terms that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala addressed Quraysh, who were traders, that Allah has purchased from the believers their lives and their persons, their lives and their wealth, بِأَنَّ لَهُمُ الْجَنَّةِ, in exchange for paradise. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks to us throughout the Quran in the terms of there's profit, there's ribh, and there's khusran, there's loss. But if you expend time without benefit, you are in loss. Which is why إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ. By time, man is indeed immersed in loss. Because the default is, people are wasting their time. Either by using it harmfully or without benefit, or by opportunity lost. And the intelligence said, opportunity lost is utter loss. Al-fawatu khusran. Opportunity lost is utter loss. So it's a means of rewards, right? Social and religious duties that you can do so many things. You can attend funerals, visit the sick, the Eid prayers, the Friday prayers, congregational prayer, visiting people, hosting people. There's numerous opportunities for good. So you're trying to maximize the good in every way possible. How do you maximize your time? If you consider, okay, if I'm living in my RV, how much good am I able to do on my own? If you're trying to maximize the good in life. Imam Tahir Anwar in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area, said, one of his friends discovered how he can monitor the stock market. So Imam Tahir asked him, how? He said, I just observe people at Fajr prayer. Because when the stock market's doing well, fewer people attend Fajr prayer. But those who do, you observe they're all relaxed and they're looking calm and happy. But when things are going bad, you see more people stay on and they're making dua. When things are really rough, more people come to Fajr prayer and they're making like heartfelt dua. He says, I know what's going on. The stock market is struggling. Because a lot of the Muslims in the Silicon Valley, invest in the stock market. They have shares. A lot of people in IT have shares in the stock market, etc. So there's all kinds of means of reward and that's what we're trying to maximize in life. You also benefit from experience. You also benefit from experience in several ways. One is from the counsel of the experienced. Anything you do in life, whether religious or worldly, you can do it better by consulting those who have already done it. That is from basic intelligence. It is not from intelligence, well, I'll figure it out myself. So that's one of the great benefits of society. That there are those experienced. Anything you want to do, consult those who've done it before. Simple. And that's one of the advices that many people, for example, decide to start their project. They're starting a Muslim food bank. You're not the first person on earth starting a food bank. There are both Muslim food banks out there and there's broader food banks. You go to any food bank and you say, we're thinking of starting a food bank. Any advice? Do you expect that they will say, no, we're too busy to give you advice? No, they see it as a cause. They'll help you out. You want to start an online business? There are a whole bunch of people got online businesses. Maybe 2 or 3 of them might not help you. Someone else might. But look for people who can give you half decent advice, not bad advice. And that's all it takes. But also, through mixing with people, you observe the ways of the experienced. How they do things. And you gain insight, both insight related to the same thing or other things. By observing the experience, because the dedication they have, the commitment they have, etc. And one of the things you benefit, you also test your own character and experience, right? Because by the testing circumstances in life, you acquire experience that, am I really caring? You only find out when you pass by circumstances where you could have stopped and assisted, but you didn't. Have I really controlled my anger? You only find that out through experience, by being in situations where you could have been angered. You would have been angered before, but now you've brought it under control. So you benefit. So these are some of the benefits of society. Imam Ghazali says in the end that really one has to, we go back to what we mentioned in the beginning, that the default is that one lives in society, but one cultivates those times of seclusion. One cultivates those times of seclusion in one's day by prioritizing one's obligatory devotion to Allah. And then by attending to one's sunnah devotion to Allah before and after each of the prayers, doing the sunnah prayers, but doing those as acts of turning to Allah. Because the understanding of seclusion is to step away in order to turn to Allah. To step away in order to turn to Allah. And then to add to it, that in society, have times where you step away from the mundane to the meaningful. You're going and helping out at the masjid, rather than just sitting there making social commentary. The state, our mosques don't cater to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, your local mosque doesn't, but people come there, they pray. You go there, pray. So what do you Saturday morning? You go help clean up the mosque. Nobody needs to find out. You don't have to put it on. Imam Slimi was complaining in private that, a lot of people, they come to, when they come to help at different projects they have, he said, Shaykh, they say 3 things. One of them is, Shaykh, you don't post pictures of this online. I said, well, that's not why we do it. Secondly, they ask permission. Can we take a picture? So they've not even started work, but they take a picture of themselves next to the food in the food bank before they've even picked up one can and moved it from place A to place B. And I forget the third one. So to cultivate those acts of stepping away, And sometimes you may need to step away for some period of time. One of the times for that is travel. Right? At least some of the travel, take advantage of that to step away to devote yourself to Allah. But travel is also because if you do travel, typically you may not be working, etc. That's time when at least some of it, give it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I saw a beautiful example of that. There's a family that they wanted to take their kids to all the interesting places in Istanbul, but they came to an agreement, which is mornings, we do some religious things together. Then from Dhuhr till Maghrib, the kids could do all the things that they wanted to do. Then between Maghrib and Isha, they'd go to some gathering of knowledge or remembrance in Istanbul. Then they'd eat Isha, then they'd have dinner as a family. It was in the winter, so it's like, Isha time was relatively early. They'd have dinner after Isha, they'd go to sleep. So they mixed both the worldly benefit, but also with religious benefit. And they emphasized, okay, let's go. Every morning they're going to one of the beautiful mosques in Istanbul, but we'll stay there till sunrise. Right? So you connect it not just to the mundane, but the spiritually meaningful. And those are times where we enter into seclusion. But nothing, as we close with the words of Ibn Ata'illah, nothing benefits the heart. He said, مِثْلَ عُزْلَةٍ, like some time of seclusion in which one enters into the planes of reflection. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to facilitate that for us and for you, and to make this, this learning about seclusion a means of turning to Him. Inshallah, this was the last class for this term, and then we're going to start the adab of travel, the book of the proper manners of travel, from the beginning of December, from the beginning of January. Bi-idhnillahi ta'ala, wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina wa Nabina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam, walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.